Hello and welcome back to another episode of Break of Throw. I'm here with primetime Matthew Edgar, and today we're going to be talking about a couple of rising stars in the game. But before we get to that, Matt, I want to talk to you a little bit about the youth game in general, because these two players are kind of part of that generation what's a little bit of a hybrid between getting that youth infrastructure into how they play darts and how they progress, but also still part of that kind of pub scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for my generation, we was growing up in pubs, in clubs, playing in super leagues, pub leagues, counties. It was all basically just played in either a pub or a pub with a stage. And when you look at youth darts in general, I think it's one of those things that the generation beforehand are always going to feel jealous of. I know when I was playing youth darts, there was people before me going, oh, if this was around when I was around, it would have been so much better. But when I think back to my generation, we played for a certificate. If you won a tournament, you might have got a TV. You know, there wasn't money in the game. There wasn't pathways and opportunities. And that's what we wanted back then. We wanted opportunities. We wanted pathways. Nowadays, you do well on the youth tour, you're in the World Championship, you're in the Grand Slam of darts, you're getting tour cards, and you're earning a full-time professional wage. Yes, the money's great, but it was the pathways and the opportunities that we lacked. And they're sort of developing all the way through now. When we look at JDC, when we look at opportunities now here at the Super Series, Rising Stars Week, which we've seen the likes of Nathan Potter recently, who's played at a Rising Stars Week, then get a call up to a main week as well. So there's opportunities all the way through. Now, with the development of academies and the way things are going in that side of darts, we're going to see more opportunities develop. You know, we're seeing championships playing in Gibraltar now where junior players are getting together, and that's just the start of it. There's going to be a lot more opportunities. We've got the JDC Super 16 as well. So I think that's going to, you know, potentially pick up more streaming or more broadcast, more opportunities, which is going to help with sponsorship. It's all looking very, very good. But I'd say where it is right now is still within the infancy stage. It's going to develop and grow, and we're sort of seeing that transition.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because in around 10 years' time, if we did this episode again on two people of similar age, you'd expect them to only have come through darts academies and that sort of product, wouldn't you?
And they will say, I wish it was like this now when I was younger, because when I was younger, darts academies were just starting out. So it's giving an opportunity for people to go and play, but what's not there at the moment is maybe like the inter-club or the inter sort of academy. You know, if you start taking up something like MMA, you'll go to the gym, you'll train in your gym, then you'll go into interclub where gyms will go against each other before you then start competing. I think that's something we're going to see, but I think there'll be a lot of interest in that sort of interclub, that sort of head-to-head sort of rivalries of these academies, and I think we'll almost see sort of like a team sort of aspect develop throughout these, and that might even take over from the county scene.
So the first rising star we're going to have a look at here is Charlie Mambi. We're going to take a look at his hockey position to begin with. What stands out for you here, Matt?
Slightly off to the right-hand side, which does mean he's got to adjust his foot position very slightly. We'll see the back foot now just moving a little bit more towards the line of the toe. The line of the toe, the front foot, the lead foot. We draw that line to the back of the room and off at the same angle. Now, the more you move over to the right-hand side, the more that back foot needs to come round to turn the hips to allow the arm to throw straight down. And that's why you can just see that angle as well between where the elbow is and that wrist position. He is throwing straight down that line, but he's just set off to the right-hand side.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially at kind of the leg, what goes towards the hockey. It's got a really interesting arc. You don't really see it often with players. When it comes to a lean, what do you kind of do on a day-to-day basis to find out what's best for you?
That's the tricky part, because there is a lot of trial and error in darts, and a lot of the time it leads to error, or it leads to further error, because until recently there's not really been the level of expertise within the coaching industry within darts, because there wasn't really a high demand for it in the past. There was almost an ignorance to coaching, and maybe even programs like this at a period of time where people would have sort of shunned it. And you probably stand how you feel comfortable, do what you feel comfortable, do what's right though, because actually if you're doing something wrong, it's going to cause something else to compensate. And that's the point here. Yes, you can throw in different ways. People do throw in different ways, but they're compensating, because there are things that lean into a certain style of throw. How you hold the dart, where the shoulders position, what the stance, it all leads towards there is actually a system and a way of throwing this dart that suits you. And when you then start to do things like Charlie's doing here, where you lean, he's going to compensate for that in other places. Because of the lean here, where it's breaking the line of balance very slightly, he's going to compensate in the shoulder. So now we need to work into, well, the shoulder's going to lift, the shoulder's going to be more engaged. The shoulder's not just supporting now, it's part of the throw. So now we need to lean into that. How does the grip work with that? So there's ways around things. There's ways of adding to things. And that's what we need to do. We need to add to throws.
The next thing we're going to look at is Charlie Mambi's throw from a side-on angle, and he's got kind of a bulbous at the front of his dart, and we can see that it means that he grips his dart really towards the front, doesn't he, Matt?
Absolutely. And, you'd expect this. When we talk about someone who is going to use that shoulder a little bit, traditionally someone with a lean is just going to drag the elbow a little low as well, which is going to pop. That's going to lift. So the shoulder's going to lift, the elbow's got to lift. Everything's got to come up. So when that's got to come up, we've got to have a look at the grip. Now, with this grip, it's very close to the front of the barrel. Traditionally, someone who throws at the front side of the barrel is someone who needs to throw with a lot of speed. And that's what Charlie needs within his throw. He needs the dart to travel fast to the board. So there's different ways in which he can do that. And the first one is with the grip.
Yeah, and then the next one really is with the equipment, isn't it? Because we look at his flights and they're kind of designed to make sure he can throw fast, aren't they?
Absolutely. They're a smaller flight, less surface space, less drag, less catchment. I always say think of a parachute. The bigger the parachute, the more catchment, the more slower you're going to come down to the ground. It's the same thing with this. When you're propelling through the air, the smaller the flight, the quicker the flight's going to travel to the board. So he has compensated. Because of that lean, he's now found that he can't probably throw the same with standard flights because it doesn't work the same for him. So the compensation is, right, I'll have smaller flights. I'll move my grip further down the barrel. That is two things that's going to make the dart travel faster to the board. And then he's got a very strong flick of the wrist. So that lean has caused him then to develop other parts of his game. And it's understanding. It's understanding, right, okay, this is how I want to stand in this on. So what things do I need to do? What are the attributes? What is making my throw work? And lean into those. And he certainly has here.
What would you say is kind of like the beginner's guide to flights? Because I imagine there's a lot of people coming into the game now who probably haven't even seen much. Like, they've just seen the MODUS systems and the standard flights, and that's kind of it. But there's a lot of things like these kites and then pear-shaped flights, for example. What is kind of the basic rundown of flights?
So the general idea is the smaller the flight, the faster it'll travel to the board, and it will also flatten the dart out on certain throws, depending where you grip it. And this is where it gets really complicated and tricky. And this is why I always advise people the best thing to do is actually seek proper advice. There's a lot of trial and error, and what you tend to find is when you do trial and error, you'll stay on trial and error, because actually, they're the flights for me. I've hit a 180, I'm playing well, and then a week later, they're no longer the flights for you. I'm going to try this flight. I'm going to try this one. I'm going to do this barrel. And you get stuck in that trial and error because you don't know what's working. And it might actually be, well, that flight works for you. That's giving you a good angle. That's giving you a nice tight arc to the board. It suits your grip, but the stem's wrong. And maybe if the stem was a bit longer, it'd suit. So then you end up like canning something that's working for you because you don't realize it's working as a strength. So it's understanding really all those sort of key points that make your throw good, and then just leaning into them. But it's a very, very hard blanket answer to give.
Another thing I wanted to touch on was the fact that Charlie Mambi wears a watch on his non-throwing arm. Now, a lot of players do kind of do this where with the arm, what they're holding the darts with, they do potentially wear a watch. I assume that's something what comes from playing at a younger age. You've kind of had it maybe when you go to the pub. It's something you normally wear to the pub, and that's what you're comfortable with. A couple of questions here. I assume you wouldn't recommend kind of adding stuff at this point. If you're not throwing with a watch, I assume, people make a lot of money in darts, that all of a sudden if you get a nice fancy watch, you don't have to put it on when you're throwing. But then the second question is about that throwing arm. You don't really want anything on that, surely?
No, absolutely not. But some people do. Martin Adams, Simon Whitlock, two people that come to mind. There's probably plenty more. But they're the two on the top of my head who actually have something on and loosely, so you feel it moving. I suppose it's like living next to a train station, though, isn't it? If you live next to a train station, you don't hear the trains. But if you go around that guy's house, it's like, how do you live with that? And he's live with what? Like, there's trains. So I get that if you get used to that. However, my personal preference, I don't have a ring, I don't have a watch, nothing. And that's just in general. But I guess, like say, if it's something you've grown up with, you've always been down the pub with it, I just don't think I'd want to know the time, to be honest, playing. I just, you go to a casino, there's no sort of element of that, is there? There's no clocks anywhere, and I guess this would be the same sort of thing. I wouldn't want to know how long I'm on the hockey. Just want to get up there and blank out.
Mental fortitude is a key strength of Charlie Mambi, and he's kind of got the confidence to try extravagant things, as we can see here. He's playing against Lloyd Walker. Lloyd Walker starts off, tries to be a bit cheeky, throw his arm out for a 180, misses, but then you see Charlie Mambi actually go and one-up him because he hits the maximum doing the cheeky way. This is actually a big tell, really, isn't it, to kind of how a player feels on the hockey?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't do stuff like that when you don't feel right. Yes, you can go through the actions, but you've got to believe it. And I believe he believes it. And I like it. I've been crying out for this a lot more in darts. I think darts is a little bit too samey. And, you know, at a risk of putting down the sport I love, it can become very boring, and very boring very quickly. Because if all we're doing is judging people over who's going to throw the best darts, that's a story you can't tell 365 days a year. We need other stories to tell. We need other things that are happening. And when we get moments like this, when we get characters coming through, when we get those little bits of extra, that's what's going to help carry the sport to the next level.
And we saw kind of that mental fortitude again when he lost to Adam Gavlas in the weekly final, because to be honest, he did not do much wrong in that final. And Gavlas is a quality operator, and Charlie Mambi hasn't really been here that long, and he's already knocking on the door. He's already made his way onto the Pro Tour. I think he broke some sort of record when he made his debut. He lost, but it was over a ton plus average. And people would have heard of Charlie Mambi, but this kind of last year, he's really exploded onto the scene, hasn't he?
He has. He's clearly taken the game a lot more seriously. We know what his goal is. He wants to go get a tour card. There's a lot of people within the industry that think he will. I was watching an interview recently with Chris Mason as well, one of the lead pundits within the sport, and he name-checked Charlie Manby without even being asked the question. He believes fully in him, and there's a lot of people that really do. And that's because of what he's doing and how much he's progressing this year. And if he can progress rapidly as much as he is this year, a little bit of sustainability in there over the next couple of months, get on the tour, be interesting to see where he goes.
The last time we actually saw Charlie Mambi here, he was playing in the Rising Stars week, and he lost to Henry Coates in the semi-final. We're going to talk a little bit more about Henry after the break. Welcome back to Break of Throw. I'm here with primetime Matthew Edgar, and we're talking a little bit about the rising stars in the game. Before the break, we spoke about Charlie Mambi, and now we're going to speak about Henry Coates. But there's a question I want to speak on a little bit before that, Matt, and it's about pace. A lot of these young players coming through now, they are fast.
Yeah, I think it's bred into them as well, isn't it? Like, I think before there was a lot of, especially when you're playing down the local, the guy who's played 25 years with the advice of take your time. That was one we heard a lot. Where now it's all about entertaining darts, quick darts. I think anyone who starts throwing a little bit slow instantly gets sort of flagged as a little bit boring nowadays, and who really wants to be known as that? You know, we look at, there was a young lad, wasn't it? Liam Mandel Lawrence was coming through, played well on the European tour, and at no point was that tournament talking about how well Liam Mandel Lawrence was playing. It was all about his pace, and it stuck with him. And I've had conversations with Liam over the last sort of 12 months or so, and it's something he's actively trying to change. He's trying to throw quicker. He doesn't want to be known as that guy. And I think some of this comes down to good old-fashioned peer pressure.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're going to have a look at Henry Coates there, and he is one of the fastest players we've seen here. We'll start off with his hockey position. Again, kind of like Charlie Mambi, it's not massively away from the centre of the hockey. There is a little bit of a lean on it, but a lot of these players you see coming through, you don't really see them off to the left and the right, do you?
No, it's very much about alignment these days. And I think that comes down to programs like this, coaching, YouTube videos that are out there now. There's a lot more content out there to absorb where you can get a little bit of guidance, places of where to look, where you can film your throw and go, right, okay, I can see if this incorporates into my action. I can see if this is something I can bring into place. And a lot of that does talk about things like eyes, about alignment, about the wrist, the elbow, all these different positions. So there is content out there that can guide you for a little bit of self-discovery, and I think we're seeing that certainly with the younger players and those players that have had sort of coaching and guidance from a young age.
You can see from Henry Coates there as well, that elbow kind of tucks a little bit inside, but then the hand itself comes back up to that dominant eye. And as he's about to throw it, there's almost like a little bit of a burst forward, isn't there?
A little bit of a jump, and you will. We spoke recently about the elbow and the shoulder popping. The other thing is everything can come up. But anytime you lose height, you've got to regain it, because you've got to make that arc of the dart. You know, we're not shooting a gun. It's not going to go flat. It's going to arc, rainbow-esque. You want a nice tight arc. And with that, if someone comes low, you've got to regain it somewhere. So just have a look around the shoulder and the chest. Keep the height there. That's probably the top advice to stop that sort of jolting.
We're going to have a look at Henry Coates in full flow here as well. You kind of see his grip. It's more towards the back of the dart, towards the stem, and that kind of helps with the arc, doesn't it? You imagine it to have quite a traditional up and down arc when you hold it that far back.
Yeah, definitely, but a very, very strong throw, which does really help him propel the dart. You can see here, look at the wrist from the back, and then all the way through to the point where the fingers are coming back to point at him. That means that wrist is really, really engaged with the throw. So my top advice, if I was working with Henry Coates right now, would be some maintenance. He's going to have to watch that wrist, because if he starts practicing the hours of a professional player, if he starts doing the tour, which we've seen the calendar for the PDC tour moving forward, if that's somewhere he wants to go and play his darts, there's not going to be a lot of time for anything but darts. There's going to be a lot of wear and tear, a lot of practice. You know, we see players play the Pro Tours, but there's 3 hours preparation go to get themselves ready for the Pro Tour, plus then the full day, plus any other tours or systems that he may be playing in and his practice. So I would say right now, looking at that throw, it is essential that he has some maintenance in there, regular maintenance with a professional, and a good stretching routine.
That's interesting, because it's probably something what a lot of people don't think about, because you look at Henry Coates' throw and it's, you know, it's very visually appealing. He does the full follow through. You see the arm, it flicks out. But for as good as it is, like you said, you have to take care with it, because you can find the perfect throw, but obviously you want the perfect throw to last, don't you?
This is the problem right now. We're behind the game. Darts is behind the game as a sport. When you think about players right now, we look at some of the players at the top end of the game, whether it's mental or physical, there are a lot of injuries appearing in the sport of darts. When did that ever happen? When did we ever hear of a dart player getting injured? But because the calendar's going up, because the intensity's going up, because the amount of practice that people are having to do, the wear and repair and the risk of a repetitive strain injury is heightened all the time. So now more than ever, do we need people to start looking at the proper channels of maintenance. If you want a long career in this sport, it's no longer just turn up and have a few throws at the board. We need proper routines that need to happen before and after long matches and days.
The last thing we're going to look at here is Henry Coates in finals night of Rising Stars. But there was a few things to talk about here. For one, he missed double 12 for a Saturday night live 9 darter. And then in this final, he was 3-0 down to Ryan Branley, and he ends up going on to win it. And I think that is a massive testament to the mental strength of him, because Ryan Branley did not really falter in this final. Henry Coates just got better and better. There was a time where he hit a 180, Branley replied with a 180, and then he took out 142 to keep the game alive. And that sort of mental strength is ridiculous for someone of that age.
It's needed. It's essential now. I think we've got to a point in the sport where we don't really consider age as a factor anymore. It's never really been a sport that requires age as a barrier to entry, whether you're 60 or whether you're 18. And I think the fact now we've got an 18-year-old world champion, I think now the story of this player's young, well, how's it going to, I think that's gone. We just expect now from players. And I think one of the things that players do learn very quickly is that actually it doesn't matter how good you are, you're going to get hit back, and you're going to get hit back hard. When you get to the Pro Tour, 128 players walk through the door. These are the best 128 players from wherever they're from. We've got the best player from France, from Belgium, from Holland, from Germany. Wherever they're from, whatever room they walk into, they win. Except that one. 127 people are going to lose. Whether you're losing the first round or the final. 127 people of the best players are going to... Think of that, the talent, the egos, everything that goes with that. And then you've got to get used to the point where you're losing. 34 Pro Tours in a year. How many win more than one? How many don't win any? That's a lot of defeats to take throughout a year, plus the European tours and everything else that goes with that. So you need to be able to roll with the blows. You need to be able to take them. And I think what we saw there from Henry in that final suggests that he's ready for that sort of environment where I might be playing well, but I can play well and lose. It's no longer about you. It's not just if I play well, I win, which is the attitude you grow up with. Whatever room you go into, I play well, I win. Except when you get to the top, and that just shows he's ready.
It's funny because you kind of look at it and it's a massive strength for Henry to have that mental fortitude. However, when you look at it from an older player's perspective, someone with a talker perhaps, and they get, you know, seeded against these players who are a bit younger, who they know they're a bit of a talent, but I can imagine, especially back in the day, there was 101 tricks they think they could use, or they think they've got the mental strength over a player like this. So when you get a draw like that, it's like, yeah, listen, he's good, he's up and coming, but you know, I've got experience, I've done a lot in this game. But these days, that advantage is becoming a little bit thinner, isn't it? Because you come up against someone like Henry Coates, someone like Charlie Mambi, and yet they've not done as much in the game as these players. But the mental strength is nearly on par already.
Oh, absolutely. And reputation matters. It really does. If you're stood behind someone, you're 4-0 down, You've never heard of them before. You're looking at the throw. It doesn't quite look as picturesque. You think, you're not going to be able to cross the line. I'm going to get back into this. I'm 4-0 down, but I can bring this back. If you're 4-0 down to Luke Littler, you give up. Oh, I'm never turning this around. I've got to break him twice just to get level and have 2 holds. I've lost. I'll see what I can get out of this, try and save a bit of face. And that's purely down to the perception of who you're playing. And if they can change that perception, like of a young player, like a young player is dangerous. A young player, it doesn't mean just because I'm young I'm not going to be as good. Luke Littler's changed the perception of that completely, and he's got an army of people behind him that are looking to do the same. And
you speak about how the game's kind of open for any age, and that means you can learn at any age as well, isn't it? There's a lot of things what older players can potentially take from younger players, because the kind of expectation is the younger players have to take from the older players and that experience. But sometimes kind of looking at younger players taking the game for what it is, it's exciting, they're into it, you know what I mean, they want to play it because it's fun. Sometimes the older players might forget about that.
And you want to find new ways of doing things. You know, just because someone's been there before doesn't mean that they've done it right. You know, we look at Phil Taylor, 16-time world champion, got a lot wrong, even on his counting side of things. Could he have won more? Yeah, he could have, absolutely. And when we look at, you know, the modern way that players are going for checkouts, it changes. The thing I'm banging on about all the time at the moment in regards to the master counting. If you get 1 treble 20, you cannot use the 19s as cover, where everyone uses the 19s. And we're starting to see that come into play now, where people are starting to use the 17s, because it moves you 6 darts away rather than 9 darts away from a finish. The game's evolving because people are going to look for ways to find an advantage. Because as we go through the rankings, when we get to a certain level, we're not even talking percentage anymore between players. What is the difference between that player and that player? What's the difference between Luke Littler and Luke Humphries? We're not even talking a percent. We're talking a margin of a percent. So every little bit of an advantage you can get is going to help. And if you can find some of that within the counting, the breakdowns, the maths, it's going to give you that little bit of an edge. And that's what everyone's doing right now. They're just looking for that tiny little bit of an edge because the standard is leveling off and everyone's starting to meet it.
For Henry Coates, obviously winning the Rising Stars week, what could that potentially do for him going forward? Because obviously we know it'll give him a bit more reputation in the game. It'll undoubtedly help his confidence. But when he comes back and plays in a traditional week at the Super Series, he's got to fancy himself, surely.
It'll give him a good vibe of the room as well. It does matter. When you go into a venue, if you've had a bad experience there, or multiple bad experiences, you can think that it's just not your venue. There's something you don't like about it. Mine was stage 2 at Minehead. Hated the place, and because of that, anytime I was drawn on that board, it was like I dreaded it before I even played. There was other places and stages though where you've had very positive experience, where you just couldn't wait to go back there, and you feel like there's something within the setup. Like you might just like the hotel, you might like the walk down, you might like. There's so many weird things, but that's just the mental side of things coming into play. He will have that. The second he walks through these doors again, he'll remember what it's like to stand on the stage, the smoke going up, the music playing, family and friends here, counting up the pennies in his head as it's going into the bank account. All these real positive vibes will come back to him very, very quick. So I would say keep an eye on him because he's going to be the danger.
Well, Matt, thank you very much. And thank you for watching the latest edition of Break of Throw.